Hello and welcome to Apologetics 101. I'm your host, Christian Apologist Brian. All right. Um, Welcome today to my channel where we talk about all kinds of Christian apologetic issues, and it's the apologetic response channel where we usually respond to people. I've been doing for a while a series called the Genesis series, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Um, I do apologize for not having a video for a while. I've been in and uh, uh, out of town a couple times, and with that, there's an interesting little story there. Uh, I told you a while back that my wife got uh, some money from a estate that that not her but her step parents had owned, and uh, they or her step family had sold the house after her step parents had passed away, and so they deviated the money among their children, and my wife got a hefty sum as a result. And so we went out of town like a date night. My son was at his grandfather's, and so we went to like in Nashville, Tennessee, and we went to a hotel. It was the best hotel we've ever been in, and had the best continental breakfast we ever had. And I don't say all that to brag, but when we actually was there, my wife helped one of the children, a child that she had met, and over to his table with his food, and she went back over there. She had this overwhelming feeling to help them. She went back over there and found out how many children I had. That 12 children went with them. They were there for a baseball game. I guess they were, doing the game or one of the teams in the game. And she goes back and she gets a whole bunch of money out, a whole bunch of money. She doesn't even count it. She just felt this overwhelming desire to help them. She didn't know what the situation was. We had no idea. And she goes back over there and gives them a bunch of money. She didn't even bother counting it. She doesn't even know how much it was. And they came back and over our table, and my wife's like, I'm not taking it back. And but they didn't want to take it back. They came back over and they said, "You sure you want to do this? Because it's a lot of money." And she said, "Yeah, I felt this overwhelming sensation to help y'all out." And we found out that they were from a church. That they were actually from a church. And they assured us that this money was going to go directly to the kids. But it was incredible. God spoke to my wife's heart, and she listened. And like I said, we didn't know what the situation was, but God did, and God provided them. And we had that extra money to spare, and she wanted to bless somebody, and I thought that was pretty cool. I thought it was an awesome situation. Um, but anyway, I've been in and out of town, and a couple of times the last couple of weeks or so, or actually, I've been back for like over a week now, I think. But before that, a couple weeks out of town, going in and out. In addition to that, I've also been back doing experiments in Blast. I got Blast at the command line right now, and I'm doing a whole bunch of experiments on that. I can show you a little bit of that. You can see where I'm doing Blast at the command line here. um, Coming up with all kinds of interesting results. I'm actually looking at I actually come up with a method to look at the unalignable regions of the genome, and so I'm just kind of looking at the differences that are not actually aligning up in the program, and I'm about ready to do another series of experiments as well. This is probably going to take me another month before I have this episode out. Normally, I don't want to try to keep on adding episodes to the topic of controversy because I want to hurry up and finish the series off. But this was a very important episode. This is going to be a discussion, much more detailed discussion that I've been wanting to have for a while on the unalignable regions of the genome. And so we're going to be having that in the Topics of Controversy series. And then following that episode, we'll be doing weighted versus unweighted. But that's probably, so that it's going to give us a little bit later time frame on when this series is going to be over. That's going to be probably, that episode's probably going to be in a month, about a month, maybe. I'm going to be doing this episode, and then in a few weeks or so, Me and Donnie Badinsky from Standing for Truth is going to be doing a couple episodes as well. He's putting something on the books for us to have those interviews. One of them is going to be on this subject right here. This is Donnie's book right here. He sent me a copy a while back. It's called the Endogenous Retrovirus Handbook. So it's go ERVs is considered by evolutionists. Some evolutionists consider it to be one of their strongest evidence, even though it's technically is evidence for evolution. But anyway, Donnie Badinsky by far is the premier expert that I'm aware of, at least on this subject. I don't know anyone that's better on that subject matter, and so he's going to be coming on my channel to have a direct discussion about that on the Genesis series. It is awesome. And another thing, I got a brand new mic, courtesy of my wife. My wife bought it for me. It's awesome. It's so professional too, right? You know, you got the microphone, got the little stand here on the back. It's got this little thing right here that filters out certain uh, mannerisms, the way we talk and stuff, and it just kind of filters out to make it sound better. I got like this little miniature soundboard. You can't see it right here, but it's a little miniature soundboard. It's got special effects on it. I could push it was her Father's Day gift to me. She actually bought it as a father, maybe a delayed Father's Day. I think Father's Day is actually passed, but she gave it to me as a delayed Father's Day gift. But it's pretty awesome because she knows I do a lot of podcasts and video recording and it's got all kinds of little functionality on it. So it's pretty cool. I love it. I really enjoy it. I had to set all this up before my interview and so forth. So this was the first interview that I actually used this mic in. So this is pretty cool. I can't wait to use it further on more episodes of or more episodes of Apologetics 101 in terms of whatever series I'm working on. Today, we are going to be doing vestigial organ. That discussion. It's going to be part of the episode of part of the Genesis series. And today we have a expert on the subject matter of vestigial organ, who's written quite extensively on this subject matter and talked on this subject matter a lot. He has degrees and expertise in anatomy and other types of medical professions, and named Dr. Jerry Bergman, and he is a pretty much an expert when it comes to subject matter. He's got a number of books written on the topic matter, and so I don't know of anyone better to discuss with us the evolutionary claim of vestigial organs, and so he's going to be with us today. And so, without further ado, let's dive into our interview.
Hello, my name is Dr. Jerry Bergman, and I've been involved in the apologetic ministry for about 40 years. And so it's good to be here and relate some of my experiences and what I've learned in doing the research I've been doing for 40 years. And this is an important subject for me because I, at one time, was an evolutionist and I had concerns about evolutionary worldview. And so I began doing research. And the first subject I picked was vestigial organs, because most of the books, just about all the books actually, that defend evolution talk about vestigial organs and claim there are 100 or close to that vestigial organs. So I thought it would be easy to do research in a medical school where I was at and determine indeed whether these organs called vestigial were indeed vestigial. And guess what I found? Every one of them had a function, some less important than others, but nonetheless, they all had a function. And in 1895, Wiedersheim, a German scientist, he listed 86 And since then, numbers gone up and down, but by and large, that still is found, I find amazingly, in books on evolution and biology books. My grandson had a biology text for his class, and it also, now this is like 3 years ago, it also claimed that a major argument for evolution was all of the useless organs called vestigial organs. The reasoning is that if God created us, he would not have put in all these structures that had no function. And so therefore, the concern is, why would God make an organism with useless organs? And I wrote a book on that subject eventually, and I've done a lot more research. I've done actually another book since then, but this is the book I wrote about a decade ago. And Encyclopedia Britannica, a good example is, and this is a fairly recent volume, and it says the human body, for instance, has more than 100 such organs, and it lists some: the appendix, the vertebra, the coccyx, in other words, wisdom teeth, muscles that wiggle the ears, and hair on the body, etc. So this is still mentioned, although this is a couple years old. I checked more recently, and it's still mentioned in the Encyclopedia Britannica. And here you can see more clearly what they say. And they list 100. Actually, I haven't seen any documentation of 100, but close to that. And Darwin interpreted this as rudimentary organs left over when we were evolving. And most apes, ironically, believed by Darwinists to be our closest relative, lack tails, as we do. And of course, the rudimentary tail, the coccyx, was for many years shown or argued that we lost it, and therefore that's vestigial. There's a part of it left, the coccyx, and we know that has a number of important functions. Mainly, it's an attachment point for a number of muscles. And coccyx, 3 to 5 bones, and there's about 6 or 7 muscles and ligaments that are attached to it. And without it, there would be a problem. We'd need a very different internal support system. Now, it can be removed surgically, and so there still is some support, but not nearly as much as normally required. And there you can see is the coccyx very clearly. And some have a tail-like growth, a caudal appendages, they call this. And this is not really a system connected to the vertebral column as our tails. And so these are often abnormalities which are removed not long after they're born, the child is born. And there you can see an example of this so-called tail, which is found in some children. And typically there's no muscle or nerves in there. It's typically fat or other tissue. And there you can see an interesting example. It is a so-called vestigial organ on the neck. Sorry, my throat's bothering me, but anyways, the appendix is another example. Get some water down here. Appendix is a small, narrow, worm-like shape structure from 19 to about 200 millimeters, so it varies enormously in length. It was long for decades, well, since 1800s, regarded as vestigial. But it is, now we know it has at least 6 different functions, so it is in no way vestigial. They used to routinely remove it for no reason, because they thought, well, it has no function, just gets infected and causes a problem. But now they do not remove it unless there are clear indications that it needs to be removed. Typically, when it's inflamed, they use antibiotics to deal with the problem. And here we can see the colon, and now the vestigial organ is right over here. The vermiform appendix is right over here from the cecum area. That's where it's located. And the tonsils, another claimed vestigial organ. And again, these were routinely removed for many years. Now we know that they are necessary, and so they're not removed unless there's clear indication. When I was about 4, I guess, or 5, I had mine removed for no reason. I asked the doctor why, and he said, well, they cause problems later on. So it's best to remove them now while you're young and healthy, as opposed to later. So there was nothing wrong. They removed them as a prophylactic measure. And now, of course, they don't do that, fortunately, because they realize that your tonsils are the first line of defense in the body. And therefore, if you lose them, you no longer have this first line of defense in the body, and that causes a problem. Another example here is the hyoid bone and teeth right here. Should be shown here somewhere. But the wisdom teeth, I call it wisdom because you typically, they erupt when you're about what, 14, 15, 16. But these likewise, in a healthy person, especially in areas where they have a stiffer, harder diet than we do, our diet's quite soft. And therefore, the wisdom teeth, the jaw doesn't get exercise as it should. But in areas where they have a stiffer, tougher diet, wisdom teeth are far less likely to be a problem. When dentists went to various small islands or other parts of the world doing free dental work, they discovered that the people at those places rarely have a problem with vestigial organs. And so, and this tonsils as well. So they believed it was vestigial and therefore prophylactically were removed. In the past, fortunately today, they are rarely removed unless there's clear need. Sometimes they have to be removed, but it's far less common than it used to be. So it was believed that tonsils could cause health problems. Well, actually, they do become inflamed because they get overworked. And so they, when they're doing their job, they become inflamed and cause a problem. And the problem is typically if you have a small area in that part of your body, the oral cavity is certain areas are small, it could cause a problem or too small. Okay, some statistics in the 30s, over half of all children had their tonsils and adenoids removed. And 1971, that's pretty old. Now it's 14.8 per thousand. And in today, it is even less than that. I think around 6% or 6, sorry, per thousand. So it's gone down very low for good reason. And Kaiser, a researcher, found no significant difference in the number of colds, sore throats, and other upper respiratory infections and a tonsillectomy. In other words, tonsillectomy did not reduce, as they thought it might, number of colds and infections, and therefore it wasn't even helpful for what they used to think it was for. Actually, I would think it would be more common because you're losing the first line of defense against bacteria. These are called super lymph nodes, and because they provide the first line of defense against bacteria and viruses. And of course, removal of the tonsils eliminates tonsillitis. Well, of course, you don't have them, so they can't become inflamed. And that's why. Okay, tonsils have a role in the immunological system, as does the appendix. They are both very important, now we realize. Although again, our immune system has a number of backups. And so if one is removed, we still have the backup systems, but it's helpful to have as much immune system intact as possible. And especially during early life, the lymphatic system, the appendix, for example, is very important, as well as the Peyer's patch, which ironically haven't been claimed to be vestigial, but they are part of the intestinal tract, Peyer's patches. And I can skip some of this. There's the thymus. The thymus has an interesting history because the thymus was believed to be vestigial, and it was removed, partially removed, actually, in some cases, as well as completely removed in other cases. And it was found its removal ended up causing quite a few problems. I think I have pictures of the problems it caused, but oversized thymus was once routinely irradiated or excised it, removed part of it to shrink it. But the reason the thymus was oversized was because it was working overtime because the body wasn't producing the hormones required, T3 and T4, in order to deal with body metabolism. And therefore, the thymus increased production of the hormones in order to compensate for the lack that was being produced, the functional that was being produced. And the problem was, we realize now, the thymus was simply trying to compensate, but in fact, the problem is that the thymus doesn't get enough of the iodine in order to produce the effective T3 and T4. And therefore now typically with the certain thymus problems, they typically include a diet or supplements of iodine, or fish can be helpful. And so thymus, other things it does, it matures T cells, and it shrinks in adults and is less active than during childhood. And of course it shrinks because it's less needed, because once the T cells are mature, it's less important. And by and large, I think I'm getting a couple of organs confused. It's been 20 years since I covered this, but I'll clarify that in a few minutes. But anyways, so the thymus is less important as one gets older, because its job is when you're young to mature T cells, and that means the T cells are able to work. The problem with T cells is it's got to know self from not self, and the thymus helps the body determine what is self and non-self, so the body doesn't attack itself, producing what they call an autoimmune disease. And if the thymus is removed too early in life, then the immune system, of course, fails to develop properly. And so that is a problem. And the eminent German evolutionists concluded that not only is the thyroid vestigial, we're at the thyroid now, the thyroid vestigial, but that our body contains many other rudimentary organs. And they have the thymus and the thyroid. Now we're on the thyroid. The thyroid is the structure that produces T3 and T4. And the thyroid can become larger, causing problems. And surgeons found that adults could survive after part of the thyroid gland is removed. So it was assumed it has no function. But a lot of organs are backup or are important for regulatory systems. And in the 1890s, the thyroid was proven to have several important functions. And Dr. Theodore Kocher said it did. He basically compared patients who had the entire thyroid removed and those who had part of it removed. And he found those who had part of it removed were more likely to grow up normal. Those who had the entire gland removed had severe problems. And here we see the thyroid problem, which they used to try to deal with by thyroidectomy, a goiter. And now we know that the key is iodine supplements, and that reduces the problem. And this is quite a large goiter, and this one is so large it could push against the windpipe, and therefore breathing becomes difficult. Well, a lot of things become difficult when you have this issue, but and this is interesting, where simply dietary supplements could deal effectively with the problem. And here we see a goiter, a smaller goiter, and there's the thyroid gland. And normal, of course, is able to do its job. And a goiter is where it's enlarged. And again, the reason why is because it's enlarged in order to compensate for the lack of the T3 and T4 hormones. So Kocher was a devout Moravian, and he believed that, as Genesis taught, that God's creation is perfect. So therefore, he believed that no useless organs existed in the body. And this is why he became suspicious that indeed removing it was not the appropriate way to respond. And this is why he did his research, which eventually, of course, we realized that a thyroidectomy does not solve the problem. And if you perform a complete thyroidectomy, if he did on a young girl, for example, in one case, and these were twins, or I think a sister, brother and sister, but anyways, he removed a complete the thyroid. And then he examined her again in 1883 and realized that she had become a cretinoid. And that is a problem if you have the thyroid removed, cretinoid. And this causes a major stunting of growth and physical and mental developments. And therefore, not only you were smaller, stunted in growth, but you also had a lower IQ. So mental development was impeded. And the difference between, okay, the patient and her younger sister was now enormous. So we had, in this case, sisters. Did other research on twins, and the same research, the same conclusions were found. So he contacted 102 patients that he performed thyroidectomies on in 1872. And he wasn't able to contact all of them, but he was able to contact 77, and soon noticed a major difference between the 28 who had performed a partial removal and the 24 in whom he had completely ablated, removed the gland. And therefore, he had not evidence from one case. We know that an N of one, they call that in statistics. If you have one case, that's interesting, but that doesn't, that's helpful, but it doesn't prove what you're trying to prove or trying to show. And in this case, he had a lot of cases where he showed clearly that it's not a good idea to remove it. And this is a girl who is a cretinoid. And that's what I talk about here, cretinoid. And there you can see a girl who's a cretinoid. And the pineal gland is another case, long believed to be useless. And it's active when you, active part, we now know, of the body's endocrine system, especially during certain growth stages. And pineal gland, the small gland, it's in the, right behind the pituitary. And there you can see pituitary, and right behind that is a pineal gland sitting there behind it. And there you go. Nice picture of the pineal gland. Very small, and therefore wasn't a lot of concern because it was so small, but now we know it has a very important function. Mainly it produces melatonin, and melatonin has many functions. It is now well known because people have a hard time sleeping, because melatonin regulates sleep, and therefore people take melatonin at night in order to help them sleep. And melatonin level in women, we found, if its levels of melatonin decreases, is a problem, particularly when the postmenopausal condition. And so the pineal, it has at least four functions. And one thing it does is regulates the biological clock. That, of course, is the role of the melatonin. And another organ, nictitating organ, is a transparent membrane hinged at the inner side of the lower eyelid of many animals. To nictitate means to move back and forth, and many animals we know have a nictitating membrane. It's actually pretty useful for many animals because it covers their eye and keeps the dust and dirt out of it. In humans, though, we do not have a nictitating membrane. It does not exist. In humans, what they used to think was a nictitating membrane is a plica semiluminarius. And what that does is that is part of the body which keeps the eye intact and where it should be, which is a support structure. It also provides lubrication in order to ensure smooth eyeball movement. And so that is now recognized. One thing that one should keep in mind is that it's hard to prove lack of function. We may not know the function, but the vestigial argument, therefore, is very subjective, and therefore it may not have a major function. Like Tim Berra, who is an evolutionist, he said the small bones found in whales and snakes are surely of no value. Well, because they're small doesn't mean they're of no value. That's just not true. In fact, we know that indeed, although they're small, they're of very important value. They are copulatory organs. As you may imagine, whales and snakes, copulation is difficult. And so these structures help facilitate copulation, which of course is pretty critical to pass on the genes of the race, of the organisms, in this case, whales and snakes. And structures are often called vestigial because we don't know what they do. And so now with the creation worldview, again, beginning with the case I cited earlier, the creation worldview would say they all have a function. And so this creation worldview encouraged researchers to not assume they're vestigial, but to assume they may have a function and try to find out what that function is. And now we know that, of course, they all do have a function. Again, there are many more than I talk about here. I just talk about the main ones that people have concerns about. And so if they are indeed were vestigial, let's assume that that's true. If they're vestigial, that would be an evidence of de-evolution. They're not evolving. Evolution means they develop more complex organs or more well-developed organs. De-evolution says the organs that are there are less developed. They're, well, vestigial. They're no longer functional or as functional that they used to be. So vestigial organ argument, if it's true, would not prove evolution, but de-evolution. And if a function was discovered, unfortunately, Darwinists still claim it's vestigial, partially because many people who write, for example, biology textbooks know a lot about biology, but they don't necessarily know a lot about anatomy. And therefore, they pick up from what they learned from their biology class and include that information in the biology books they write. And that is a big problem because wrong information gets in the textbooks and it ends up being there for many, many years. Stephen Jay Gould did an excellent article on this showing that wrong information was passed down in biology books for 80 years, even though it was not true. And so part of the problem is in biology textbooks, they are not experts in the body functions. Back to my grandson's example, his biology book talked about all these vestigial organs, but his anatomy and physiology book didn't even have the word vestigial in the book. And all the organs that we talk about as vestigial were all discussed in the book as functional. And when I taught anatomy and physiology, I had a chance to review lots of books in trying to find a book to use for my class. And I do not remember any of them, of the dozen or so that I reviewed, any of them making any claim any organ was vestigial or useless. All of them, when you look up the appendix and the other claims, all of them discussed about a function for it. And so anatomists, I would hope if you're competent, all of them would know indeed this vestigial organ idea is totally wrong. But biologists don't seem to be aware of this. But one claim is by evolutionists that loss of original function may be accompanied by a new function. And the example is the penguin wing does not permit flight, but it has become an efficient paddle for swimming. And the problem is they claim, evolutionists claim that the penguins used to fly around, used to have wings, and they don't fly anymore because the wings deteriorated. Well, there's number one, there's no evidence for this. And number two, the so-called wings on the penguin are really useful. They are incredibly good swimmers in the water. Yeah, they have to wobble around on land, but on the other hand, they do very well for their main environment, which they live in, which is the water. They mainly spend a lot of time in aquatic. And human smell is inferior to many animals, such as dogs, quite inferior. And yet we don't claim our smell is vestigial. And so because we have less function or less effective function in one structure doesn't mean it's vestigial. Human sight, good example, is inferior to many of our evolutionary ancestors, like birds. In fact, some, like owls, have incredibly good sight. They can see a small animal, a mouse, for example, at many hundreds of feet away. And so another example is human ability to climb trees. It's inferior to many primates. So nobody would claim our limbs are vestigial. And so therefore, technically vestigial structures are those that have no function. But that's not correct because now we found all so-called vestigial structures all have functions, sometimes critical for life. And that is, I think, a good summary. Okay. Thank you very much. Hopefully, I taught anatomy for many years and I worked through this. So if I went through this too quickly, please ask some questions.
I guess where we can start. Did you read that link that I sent you about that critic's objection to your definition of vestigial?
I think I looked at that. The problem is if you come up with a new definition, like some say that vestigial organs that are less useful, in us or more useful in our ancestors. But that's playing around with a word. Really, what they mean is it has no function. And uh, actually, Darwin didn't even use the term vestigial. He used the term rudimentary organs, which is probably more accurate to what they're saying. But again, the example I used, you could say we have vestigial or rudimentary eyesight or the ability to climb trees. But of course, that doesn't fit with what we are. And when you look at humans, if we had a vision like a bird, we would be clearly overstimulated and we would have a difficult time. Fortunately, we are very specific in the senses that we can pick up. Good example is I used to record my lectures when I was teaching at the university. And I noticed when I play back my lectures to evaluate to make sure that I did a good job. When I played them back to evaluate them, I had all kinds of noise. I could hardly understand them, especially noise from the radio, from the ventilation system. It was loud, very distracting. So I had a hard time listening myself. And then I realized, of course, the fact is that our ears, our hearing is very selective. Our body eliminates so many sounds so that we can better hear the sound of our voice and other voices. In other words, what it does is that the ears we have are designed specifically to pick up voices of people within a very narrow range. And the recorder I had wasn't designed to do that, pick up all kinds of noises. And therefore, one had a hard time. I had a hard time listening to the lectures. And
Yeah.
so
Well,
the hearing is designed specifically for human interaction. And that's, if we could hear like many animals did, we would be way overloaded with sounds and we'd go crazy.
right. And when I was getting ready for this interview, I sat there and realized that my fan was creating background noise in the feed, and I had to turn my fan off so that way it wouldn't pick that up while we were recording.
Good example. Yeah, good example.
All right. The on that definition that they try to come up with, well, oh well, you don't have to a vestigial can be still vestigial and biological as long as it's vestigial to what it was originally intended to do. That's what the article tried to claim, and then to me that seems like it's post hoc. First of all, it's post hoc because, or yeah, post hoc because it's like originally that they understood it to be no function, but now that they realize it does have function, they're redefining the word. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
They're trying to
that's
redefine it. And secondly, it's subjective. It actually makes the entire definition meaningless because in retrospect, if all I gotta do is speculate what I think it used to have, then any part of your body can be considered vestigial. Like, see, my arm is vestigial because at one time we used to be able to flap our arms and fly, and now it no longer has that function, so it's vestigial. You can't really
yeah.
define vestigial that way, or it loses all meaning.
Yeah, it does. That's a good point. It just loses all meaning to claim, well, we were apes and we could climb trees very effectively. Well, therefore our arms and legs must be vestigial. But that's absurd. And not because we can't climb trees doesn't mean our arms and legs are vestigial. It simply means they're designed for a different world. Our
Right.
hands are designed to write papers with our hands, write books and so on by using, of course, now we use computers, but they're designed for another purpose than climbing trees. Although there are some people out there that do a pretty good job climbing trees. I'm surprised at how well some people climb trees in different countries when anthropologists go over there and they notice some of these guys can just slither up a tree pretty well because they have a practice, been
A lot
doing
of
this
times you
since they
gotta
were
take your
children.
shoes off. It's
Yeah,
easier with your toes, but we don't have a second set of hands like primates do. They have like a second pair of hands on their feet, and they can
right.
climb and grasp branches, and they're designed specifically so they can be capable to climb trees. Where we struggle at it. We can still do it, but we still struggle at it more than they do.
Right.
All
Good
right.
point.
Why do you think that evolutionists like these these vestigial why would evolution require that these leftovers be there, like the that they need these in order. It's like it's kind of like a prediction of evolutionary view, right? Like there should be leftover remnants, but at the same time, it's it seems like the reverse of evolution, as you mentioned earlier. Like you're losing information, you're losing physical features and that sort of thing. And but why do you think evolutionists need this idea to be true in their?
I think how many respond is that they don't want us to put a foot in the door. They want us to be wrong in every area. And so it's difficult for evolution to say, yeah, yeah, we were wrong about that. We made this claim and it's not true. And so we're sorry. But we're right about all the other facts. We're not denying evolution. It's human evolution from the molecules to man. We're not denying that. But yeah, this argument was wrong. It's hard to be humble and say, yeah, we screwed up. And therefore, but again, a part of it is that the area I did, for example, is cancer research. And I know a lot about cancer and a lot about the genes that we looked at, P53 and P16 and so on. I knew a lot about that, but in the research we did, we knew nothing about any of this other stuff. And so most scientists are very narrowly focused, and most really don't have much knowledge about evolution. And therefore they can't really defend it. So they know from their standpoint, we're wrong, but they try to use arguments that are false. And they don't know they're false, but if they're anatomists, they would not use them. And so therefore, I think partially they just don't want to admit that, yeah, we messed up there. They don't want to admit that we could be right. They're right, we're wrong, end of story.
Why
And
did
so it's tragic, but I find in so many areas where we have the clear evidence in our favor, it's very hard for them to say, well, gee, you're right, we're wrong. And
why
so
did Charles Darwin predict the idea of there be these rudimentary you said that he called them rudimentary features. Well,
yeah, I'm not sure how they got the name changed to vestigial, but probably vestigial fit better what they were arguing. That has no function and has a rudimentary function. Well, it still has a function. So probably they thought it was a better idea. But if you think about it, the 100 or so claimed vestigial organs, and all of them are now false. And yet they're still in the literature, they're still used as evidence. Just a year ago, there was an article in the Toledo Blade talked about all the useless organs that we have in our body, and it went into quite a bit of detail. And so it's an argument which, again, my guess is that most evolutionists and most scientists really don't understand where we're coming from, and they don't really understand the evidence that we have. And therefore, it's hard for them to, it's a belief. They believe it. And also, as one evolutionist told me a long time ago, if you're right, I'm going to spend eternity in hell. And so, therefore, they don't want to be seen as, in their own eyes, don't want to be seen as wrong. And therefore, they insist on a worldview which is wrong. And I find it really hard to reason with them as a whole because this is their religion, it's their worldview, it's the way they see the world. And when you contradict that worldview, you're upsetting the whole way, the way they see the world. And therefore, it's very difficult for them to understand where you're coming from because they'll maybe feel, yeah, you got a good point there. And then they'll do some research to try to find out what's wrong with your worldview. And therefore, yeah, it's frustrating. I just reading a book today about this whole issue. They had stickers on books in Georgia, and the stickers basically said evolution's a theory. And they argued vehemently against that idea. That it's not it's a fact, it's not a theory. And therefore they don't, yet many evolutionists will say, well, evolutionary theory. So many will acknowledge that it's a theory, but then they'll say, well, it's a theory, but we don't mean a theory in the terms that you do. The theory is a postulate that we hold. It's not just a guess. It's not as you think of theory as a guess, but that's not why we're using the term theory. And so
yeah.
it's
But used in a strict
the
science,
key is
used in a strict scientific manner, then evolution would be more of a hypothesis than a theory. if that's the definition that they're going with. It'd be more of a type of speculation about the past that they think is true. Their in particular interpretation.
That's true. It would be technically a hypothesis. Of course, my view is it's a idea which is proven to be wrong. They debate about what we should teach in the schools. I think what we should teach is very clear. We should teach that evolution's wrong, why it didn't occur, why it could not have occurred, and why it was accepted so widely for so many years. But it's simply not true, did a lot of harm. And I think that's the approach we should take in the schools. Simply point out, for example, this vestigial organ argument's not true, and it's false. But of course, you're never going to get that in the schools, at least for a while, because the evolutionists are adamant. They believe it's true, and at best they will say, yeah, you got a good point here, or a good point there. But I think the key is, instead of debating this with evolutionists, what we need to do is get into churches. I try to get into at least a dozen churches every year, and my thought is, I should be able to do a presentation in a church every week or every month. And it's most churches, well, this isn't important, this is peripheral. I had an interesting experience. I was at Pittsburgh last weekend, and I gave a presentation at a church there about 4 years ago. And the pastor said, you really enjoyed it. But then I wanted to give a presentation there last week because I was in Pittsburgh doing a TV show. And so a friend of mine who goes to that church asked the pastor if I could do another presentation there. And the pastor who I worked with has another pastor now. So the new pastor said, no, it's not necessary. It's not, we want to spend time preaching the Bible. We don't want to spend time talking about science or about evolution or creation, etc. That's not important. Then when I was there last week, he came by and he says, I think I should rethink what you were telling me. My daughter is engaged to a man. We all like him. He's a good guy. She loves him. We like him, but he's an atheist. And then he realized, yeah, this is an issue. And so I gave him to give to his daughter's fiance a book, which the three pillars of evolution demolished, showing that evolution is not true and the overwhelming evidence is against evolution. And he appreciated it. And I have a feeling now, if we were to make another engagement, to request another engagement to his church, he'd say yes. So many pastors, they don't realize how important this is. So many tell me, when I have friends who want to bring me into their church, they say, this is controversial. This just doesn't matter whether God created us or we evolved. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. Just we got to focus on the important thing, and that's the gospel. And all this stuff is side issues, which is not important. And that's what many, many believe. And when they realize it is important, then of course they have a different opinion. The problem is what Darwin was trying to do, as he himself said, was to murder God. His goal was to murder God. How do you do that? You come up with another explanation for the existence of God. The explanation most people believe is that the creation is proof of a creator. So most people look at the creation, the skies, the clouds, the planets, life, and so on. They look at the creation, and that convinces them of a creator, which is what the scriptures teach. The heavens declare the glory of God. And so they don't realize that the whole point of evolution is to murder God. And they need to realize that it's very successful. Before, of course, Darwin, 99.9% of all naturalists and scientists, et cetera, were creationists. After Darwin now, today, about 97% of all eminent scientists are atheists. And so if Darwin was to walk on the earth again, I would think he'd be absolutely astounded at how successful he was. He would probably say, I never dreamed that I would be this successful, but I was. And so he was indeed successful. So that's why we have to remove the main impediment against belief in God, and that impediment is evolution. And some churches realize that, but so many don't. And so many churches, especially the mainline Protestant and Catholic, the Presbyterians and the Methodists and the Lutherans and so on, they feel the evidence is overwhelming, and therefore they feel we have to accommodate. the our faith to evolution. And that's absolutely tragic. And they say that because they're convinced the evidence is overwhelming. And of course, it's not. The evidence is not even underwhelming. The evidence is overwhelming against the evolutionary worldview. No question. It's just not rational to postulate the evolutionary worldview. And it's clearly the evidence is against it.
Right.
And of course, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. I have a question. On do you consider like their claim of vestigial organs? Do you consider this like an argument from ignorance? Like if it has no function, you seem to hint at this in your presentation. Like if it has no function, therefore we should say that, or if we don't know the function, therefore we should say that it has no function. And you say no, the best you can do is really to say that we don't know. It's not. And you even also reference something you also reference in your book about how this is a kind of a hindrance on scientific progression. Like if you think something has no function, then you don't pursue that function because you think that it's functionless. But if
Yeah.
you realize it does have a function, then you say, okay, we don't know the function is. Let's investigate this and see if it has a function. Is that correct?
Well said. Yeah. It's an argument from ignorance. To say it has no function, it's an argument from ignorance because what you need to say is it has no function that we know of now. Let's look and see. Maybe more research will let us know it has no function, or let us know it has a function. I think the good example is the nictitating membrane that I mentioned, which is actually a plica semiluminarius. In 1928, there was an article in an anatomical journal showing that that argument was wrong, that the plica semiluminarius has a clear, important function. It's not vestigial. This was in 1928. We're talking about almost a century ago. And when I discussed that in my book, and my new book as well, which is called Useless Organs, when I discuss that in my books, I point out that we've known about this for almost a century. Why doesn't the evolutionist get the point? And this is in a peer-reviewed scientific article by anatomists who correctly stated that indeed this structure has a very important function. It's not a vestigial nictitating membrane as has been claimed for century and a half. So the evidence is there, and the same thing with so many other organs. The evidence that the thymus had a function was around for what, 70 some years. And so this is not necessarily new information. And that's why when I was doing research on these claims, I found many articles in leading journals published a century ago were correct. And so part of it is they're just ignorant. And anatomists as a whole, by the way, are not. I doubt if many anatomists at all would claim this vestigial organ argument. And if they did, then I would conclude that they're not well read. They're behind on their research, or behind on they graduate from, they got their PhD in anatomy in 70 years ago or 50 years ago. And so they're not aware of what's going on. But again, all the anatomy books that I checked, every one of them, and I looked at about a dozen, I think, the leading anatomy books, none of them even had the word vestigial. And when I would look up the thymus, for example, and the appendix and tonsils and so on, none of them hinted that they were useless. All of them listed the functions correctly of these organs. And so part of it is just ignorance. And therefore, they need to update the education in our schools to help people understand that the arguments against evolution are correct and the arguments for evolution are problematic, at best problematic.
Well, look at the situation with Haeckel's embryos. I mean, we've known about them being false for over 100 years, and only some of the textbooks have started to take them out. So it's
Yeah,
like, and I think there's still some that still has them in there, doesn't it?
that's, yeah, I'm not aware of because but there may be there. I wouldn't be surprised. I do come up with books that do mention this still, but
Hey,
not textbooks necessarily. But
remind me,
I
the
retired about 12 years ago, so I'm kind of
right.
I haven't been thinking
Actually,
about
when
these
I was
things.
looking up your book, 'cause I couldn't think of the name of the book, and then I found that book. I wasn't aware that you wrote a new one.
Useless organs, yeah, useless organs, about 350 pages.
Is that like really recent? Is it on Amazon right now or?
Yeah, and I just updated it, and 2020, I think the copyright date is 2024. Although the copy on Amazon is not the newest. So, but then it's, there's not much difference. I'm trying to think of where, well, the creation, like ICR will have a new key, new book, or you can write to me and I'll send you a newer copy.
Oh,
So
thank you. I
hard
appreciate
to get these things on Amazon because there's just a lot of, we're not always welcome on Amazon. Let's put it that way. And there
it.
are some problems in getting our stuff on Amazon. The older edition's on Amazon, but the newer edition is unfortunately not on Amazon. But there's not that many changes. So older edition, there's just a few typo errors in there we found. And there was a couple of factual things that were wrong, but 380 page book, you're going to find a few factual things
Let's
are
talk about some
wrong.
of these vestigial organs. You mentioned several in your presentation. Um, is tonsils and adenoids is it the same thing or what? What?
Yeah,
What?
tonsils and adenoids is just another set of tonsils at just different location.
Okay.
Usually when
Um,
they remove the tonsils, they also remove the adenoids. So
okay. And this is part of your immune system, correct?
it is
That
an important part of your immune system. It's the first line of defense against pathogens is the tonsils and the adenoids. And that makes sense because look where they're located. They're located right at the beginning of our oral cavity system. And so therefore at the beginning of the inner part of it. And so therefore where their position obviously is very functional. But again, they can become overused, overworked, and become inflamed. And as a result, they sometimes, if breathing is an issue, they might have to be removed. But by and large,
there are
that's
some
90% of the
evolutionists
cases.
that, as you probably already know, that does make the claim that if you can that if it's removable, if it's something that can be taken out and you can still live with it, that means that it's not necessary. How would you
That
respond to an evolutionist that seems to think that the mere fact that it's removable and you can live without it means that they're right about it being vestigial?
Yeah, that's a very fallacious argument for many reasons. There's a lot of things you can have removed and you can live without. You can have a kidney removed, live without it. You can have a lung removed, live without it. You can have half your or more of your liver removed and no problem, or generally no problem.
You could
But we have
technically
over
live without
designed
one of your
more
arms,
than
but yeah.
pardon?
I
Go
was
ahead.
saying you could technically live without one of your arms. You could actually live without with both of your arms and still be able to live, but that
Yeah,
mean that you won't face that handicap as a result.
we have what they call over design. When you design, I once used to teach engineering courses. And when you design a bridge, what you do is you take the highest possible load that could be on that bridge. So you take 10 semis filled full of lead, you put them on the bridge, and you design it to withstand the weight of those 10 semis. And that is typically 3 times what is normal or 5 times. 5 times the better change. And so you take anything elevator, same thing. And so you take the situation and what is the load you're going to normally have, multiply that by 5, and you design it to withstand the weight of 5 times what you normally have. In an elevator, for example, you normally have, let's say, 10 people, and it gets pretty crowded. So you take those 10 people to weight, you multiply that by 5. That's called a safety factor of 5, and that is determined by the engineering standards in your community. So you take a safety standard of 5 and you multiply the 10 people's weight by 5, and then you design the elevator to withstand that amount of weight. And that, or in some cases, 3, but 5 is ideal. And that's true. Bridges, elevators, you name it. It's the commonly used. The chairs, same thing. What's a normal average person weigh? 160 pounds. So the chair should hold 160 pounds. Then you multiply that, probably in this case, 3. So you multiply that by 3, and therefore it should hold 3 times 150 pounds. And normally that's, now some folding chairs and so on, you just can't design it so it's, light and economical. And so but generally 3 is appropriate.
So what you would say is that some things that we have are designed to make it better, to improve it. And I think you argue in your book that some of it is developmental, like at certain developmental stages that we might need or require a certain types of organs or certain types of things.
Right, like maturing T cells, the example I gave. Once they're matured and developed, you have less need for the structure, the organ that does that, thymus gland, and therefore, yeah, that's true with a number of structures. They're less needed. And of course, you wouldn't call the placenta vestigial, but that's temporary. That's for a certain period. Or the umbilical cord, you would define that as a vestigial because, of course, they're needed during a certain period of development, and that's important to keep in
Oh,
mind. But
is it? Would you say that the tonsils would be more beneficiary to children whose immune system is not as developed? Maybe that's like okay, that's crucial for children to have in them. That's why it would be like the very last resort. If you have to remove it, then remove it, but not remove it just as a preliminary.
right, that is excellent, and that is very true. If you're 55 and you have the tonsils removed, I don't think you really need to worry too much about any problems. There may be some, but I'm not aware of them. But when you're 5 or 7, then there's a problem. And so, yes, these structures, especially the tonsils, if they're removed too early, you have a problem. But when you're 55 or 60, it's not an issue. And that's true with other structures as well.
Right. All right. The coccyx, also called the tailbone. This one's brought up a lot. I think you discussed it a little bit in your presentation. The coccyx purpose is it's to hold certain types of muscles that aid in sexual reproduction. Is that my understanding?
Sexual reproduction as well as pregnancy for a woman, as well as to control the body's intestinal system, the muscle support system that supports the lower portion of the body. So and again, it's over designed, and so therefore they can remove the oscoccyx, and hopefully you'll have less problems. They remove the coccyx for reasons of pain, and I'm told by doctors who work this field that often it doesn't solve the problem of pain. So its removal ends up being worthless. And so
Uh,
I know one doctor told me when somebody wants it removed for some reason, I say, well, it may help, but it may not. So we may end up doing surgery for no functional reason. And so therefore they may suggest other things to deal with the problem. But the main reason it's removed is pain.
my
And of
wife
course,
has an interesting situation. She didn't even realize that she was getting all kinds of pain from the bottom of her back, and she goes to the doctors, and uh, uh, and they told her that her her tailbone was broken, and
oh,
so she had a broke tailbone, and that was causing all kinds of pain when she was sitting down and moving around and stuff. And
so
so,
what they do to help her?
well, we haven't done anything about it. I don't know if anything could be done or not. I think I don't know if does that amend or does that fix itself eventually?
Well, it's gonna like any other bone, it's gonna heal,
Hopefully.
hopefully.
It was a month later that
It'll fuse, hopefully.
yeah, right. But you mentioned the pain thing, and that brought that to memory. Um, all right. So you mentioned nictitating membrane. What's that exactly again?
Well, it's not a nictitating membrane. In birds, there is a nictitating membrane, and what that does is cover the eyes. When you're flying, you get dust in your eyes, and so it's kind of a protection. It's like a pair of glasses. It reduces the problems you have in the the eyeball itself, the outer part of it, the cornea, and so it produces protection for that. And so in certain environments, the nictitating membrane goes down. It's also can wipe the eye clean. It's kind of like a way of like kind of windshield wipers. So it has a number of functions in many animals. Some reptiles and birds have a nictitating membrane, so therefore it is very functional. But we don't have a nictitating membrane, although I wish we did. At times, I think it'd be very useful to have a nictitating membrane, but they don't. So they claim the plica semiluminarius is a vestigial nictitating membrane, which of course it is not.
In your book, you talked about eyebrows and eyelashes. I don't think you mentioned those in your presentation. Could you
Yeah, eyebrows are really, really useful. To call that vestigial is kind of irresponsible. When your forehead sweats, it produces a lot of liquids which can get in the eye. And so eyebrows, as well as the eye, the brow itself, can be very functional in protecting your eye against the sweat. Also, they can be very functional in protecting the eyes against blows. So the eyebrow can be very important in reducing damage to the eye by blows to that part of the body. Somebody hitting you and so on. If the knuckles are shaped a certain way, they can, of course, damage the eye, but in general, the eyebrow and the hair, the eyebrow hair, can be very functional in protecting your eyes. That's why Neanderthals were fortunate they had nice protection and they were less likely to have eye injuries in everyday life.
appendix is one that's brought up a lot, I guess. I guess because you can actually remove one of your appendixes and live, and some people might bring that up. What exactly is the purpose of the appendix?
Okay,
And
there's five different functions for the appendix, so it's not single. But one of the most recently discovered is it's a safe house for good bacteria. So when you take antibiotics or for some reason you lose the good bacteria, it stores the good bacteria so it can replace it quickly. And so you take antibiotics or have diarrhea and other problems, then it effectively can replace the problematic situation of losing the good bacteria. So it's in essence now other ways you can do that as well. When you take antibiotics, the doctor should tell you to take probiotics of some type. So you have the appropriate immune system protection. And so that's one of the more recent. What else it does as part of the immune system, it's got immune tissue and tissue which will help your immune system develop. So it's a small area, so it doesn't have a lot of area in that, a lot of importance in that function, but it does provide some protection to the system. Got to remember, in your stomach is all kinds of bacteria, and you got and stomach as well as the intestinal tract, all kinds of bacteria, good and bad. So you need to reduce the bad. The immune system does that and increase or facilitate the production of the good bacteria, the probiotic bacteria, and that's why they recommend certain foods. Or to yogurt is a good example. There's a whole list of important foods that you can consume that helps you protect the the gut system and the colon.
did people was appendix like tonsils where people promoted the idea of removing them early on, and then but now they're like, well, we only remove them if we absolutely have to.
That is very true now. They used to remove them routinely. In fact, in some states, they had laws that said if you did abdominal surgery, they had to, while they were in there, remove the appendix. My wife, when she had one of our children by cesarean, well, both, and they basically, the doctor said, well, while we're in there, we thought we'd snip off your appendix. That's a freebie. And now, of course, they don't do that. But that one time, that was tragically common. And she's, I think, suffered from certain problems because of the loss of the appendix. Of course, she was an adult when that happened. She was late 20s, early 30s. So she was older, so less developmental concerns. But on the other hand, there's no way they do that now. What they do now is they try to save it. They give you antibiotics. They used to snip it off quickly without thinking or without thinking in detail. So now they don't do that. Now they basically give you antibiotics and they can reduce appendicitis problem a lot. No, not always. Sometimes it has to be removed, but that's the last resort.
On the little toe, what? Why do they think that's vestigial? I would think that the toes, any of the toes, would be useful for upright movement and stuff. Why do they think the little toe is vestigial?
Well, because it's smaller than the big toe. The big toe is more important. I guess you can do okay without a small toe. But if you're in certain activities, uh, little toe is very, very useful. And so to claim that's vestigial is, I'm not aware of anyone trying to do that. But if they are, then that's pretty irresponsible.
Right.
I was
Uh,
saying the little finger is vestigial, therefore it's not
right.
as useful. So yeah, that's pretty irresponsible. So that'd
Uh,
be interesting. You raised a good idea. I should look in to see what function that little toe has. Probably for balance, probably helps you balance because if you what you do is look up information on people who lost their little toe for some reason and to see how that's affected them in their life. My guess is you're going to find they are not quite as good keeping balance and walking and a few other things, running and so on, because they have one less toe. It also may help protect
You
the
you
bones on
actually
the other
look
side
at
of the toe.
you actually look at your toes. They're slanted. So I wonder if that's done intentionally. Like if you look at our hands, they're like they go up all the way up to the middle finger, which is the tallest, and then they go down. It's obviously designed for grasping, where your toes are probably going to help with balance and stuff. And so they're just like they're slanted, and that's how you put your shoes on. You just kind of figure out where it's slanted to, which direction it's slanted to.
Yeah. Huh.
Saying yeah, but anyway, I just figured it was probably good for balance on that. All right. Wisdom teeth. You mentioned that in your presentation, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I did a whole paper on that, article on that when I was at the medical school with my one of the professors I was working with who was a dentist. So we looked into that area quite in detail. And basically what we found was that wisdom teeth are more common in societies like ours, where a lot of our food, like mashed potatoes, is already pretty much chewed. Much of our diet, we don't need to chew much at all. But in areas where they have a very coarse diet, and the jaw therefore develops larger, and therefore there's less problems with wisdom teeth. And they are impacted in a fairly large number of cases, but that I think is largely because of our diet and because of other reasons. But one interesting importance of wisdom teeth is that if you lose a molar, you can, the wisdom teeth can help brace repairs or dental work to the molar that you lose. It'd be what, the fourth molar, I guess, that you lose. And so therefore the wisdom teeth has functions. A lot of people, I only had three come in for some reason. And again, they removed mine for no reason except they were to some degree impacted, but now they try to reduce the pain and hopefully they will come in properly. But part of that, of course, is a small jaw. And if you have a larger jaw, it's less likely to be a problem. And, but yeah, that's pretty irresponsible to prophylactically remove them.
Um, I got one down for ear muscles, but that kind of brings another thought to mind. And I think you mentioned this in your book too. Some people have like an anomaly where they can wiggle their nose, like on Bewitched, or wiggle the tip of their ears. And uh, what is? And some people think that's vestigial, but because it's only but it's only apparent in certain people. Do you
Yeah.
see that there are certain things that are isolated to an individual, maybe an individual genetics or hereditary or whatever the case may be?
The muscles that wiggle in some people, their ears, has an important function of warmth, is part of the whole panel of muscles that covers the side of our body, the side of our, in this case, the head. And therefore, it's part of the muscle system. And so it has a function of warmth, of protection, of a covering, and so on. And it's a part of the system which you can lose without a major problem. But on the other hand, it is part of the system which is as a whole important. It's a small muscle, and therefore it's not that important. But on the other hand, it is part of the muscle system, which forget how many muscles are found in the head, but there are quite a few. And it's simply one of many, which is very functional. And therefore it's not useless.
Right. All right. All right. Male. This is probably gonna get some giggles from some people. Male nipples and body hair. Um. Uh. If I understood correctly from your book, uh, what happens is that early on, because originally when you got the sperm and egg and everything else is combined, it there's no actual gender yet. The gender doesn't happen until in a certain developmental stage, and so it's like it's universal. We all have that same thing, but um, uh, but we wind up having like at a certain stage, someone might get a particular was it X or a certain chromosome or something like that or hormone I think it was, isn't it? That makes them female.
Well, yeah, that's a different subject, but basically body hair is a racial trait. Some people have large amounts of body hair. Some people, like the Orientals, seem to have very little body hair. some women, unfortunately, I had a friend of mine, she had a lot of body hair and on her arms and her chest and so on. And kind of felt sorry for her because here's a young, bright girl. She wanted to get married and she just never worked out. So guys just did not find that attractive at all. And she bleached her hair on her arm and that was worse, I guess. And she would shave it off, and that was worse. So she just, I guess, kind of, not that man's going to judge on that trait, but on the other hand, when I knew her, she was probably 35, 38, and never, not even close to marriage. And so, and she realized the issue, and she realized that she was, destined to be single. So I'm not totally, but it was difficult for her. And so therefore, we don't see a lot of, especially dark. And part of her problem was not the hair so much, but it was very black. And so we see that as a problem, but that's just a racial trait. Again, some men have virtually no body hair. Some women have more body hair than the average man. The nipples, that's interesting that people claim that in our sexualized society because sex is connected with body feeling. Body feeling is the lips, of course, you bite your lip and burn your lip. There's a lot of nerves in the lips. And so therefore, kissing is very erotic because there's a lot of nerves there. And other parts of the body where there is a lot of nerves, like the nipples, ask any woman who breastfeeds her child, she'll tell you that, boy, it can be very painful. And so therefore the nipples are very sensitive and therefore they are very erotic, as is true of just about every part of the body that's highly nerved. And so therefore for males and for females, they're a very erotic part of sexual encounters for both.
Yeah.
And so therefore to say they're not functional is, I'm just always surprised when they make that claim because in our sexualized society, it's just hard to believe that people would make a claim that's so ridiculous, and it is in many ways. So yeah, they've done studies on that. People done studies on just about everything you can imagine. And one thing they looked at is the parts of the body that are erotic, and generally they're strongly related to the nervation and level of nerves. And the lips and the nipples, of course, are probably the best example.
I
But
actually have examples of that because I'm sensitive there as well. My wife as what very well know, and so I don't like it to have those bothered with because it's overwhelming sensitivity.
yeah,
So
you're too sensitive. Yeah,
I'm too sensitive to it. So yeah, I can verify the fact that that's true.
yeah. There's a lot of nerves there.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Um, so let's move on. Parathyroid. What is that? Is that just the thyroid? Is that just a longer name for the
What are
thyroid?
you talking about?
So parathyroid.
Oh, parathyroids. Oh, parathyroids are another another there are other organs on top of the thyroid, so they're totally separate. And I'm not sure anybody claimed that they're. I guess at one time they claimed a lot of organs were vestigial, but I'm not. Well, they're small, and they're like three or four on the thyroid, the parathyroid. So I call it parathyroid because where they're located, and they're part of the body's hormonal system. They produce regulatory hormones.
What is caudal vertebrae exactly? Was it
Hollow
C?
vertebrae,
Yeah.
talking about well, the level of vertebrae, you have the vertebrae named according to where they're at, located in the body.
Is that
Caudal vertebrae, there's
they
thoracic
think that's
vertebrae, there's
vestigial?
and others. So it's just where they're located. That's all.
Do they think that it's vestigial or something?
I'm not aware of any claims that they're vestigial. So
All right. Goose pimples and body hair. We already talked about body hair. Goose pimples.
okay, goose pimples. A whole paper on this. So there's like 4 or 5 different functions. Number one, they produce a small amount of heat. And a small amount of heat, of course, their muscle activity produces heat, and so they do help warm the body. Number two, it's a way of telling you that you need to warm up, you need to protect yourself, you need to put on a coat or something. So it's a warning system as well. And therefore, pain could be a warning system, but goose bumps are kind of a painless way of letting you know for sure, hey, you're cold. Also conveys emotion, conveys feeling. And so you can pick up from other people as well as yourself. You can pick up information from the initiation of goosebumps. and they're part of the body's hair system. And so therefore when they move the hair up, they increase the insulation. When the hair is down towards sitting on this close to the skin, they're less insulation. When the goosebump pushes the hairs up, there's more insulation.
So they help with warming your body up, basically.
They help quite a bit with warming the body up. The main thing, of course, that helps is to put a coat on or something else.
Right. All right. Now there are some so-called vestigial organs on other things. I know that in your book that I have here, and and throughout most of our conversation, we've been focused mostly on the human body. But you do talk a little bit about claims of vestigial organs on other organisms as well.
Yeah, I
And
do. Yeah.
concerning spurs on a snake. Now, the evolutionists think that snakes used to have legs, and then during their evolutionary development, they lost those legs, the use of those legs. And so they look at those spurs, and is that what they consider to be the
Well,
remnants?
they claim, yeah, they're vestigial. But if you're a herpetologist, you know they're not vestigial. They're copulatory organs. Snakes, they have a hard time copulating. Well, they don't have a hard time in many situations, but certain kinds of snakes, two kinds of snakes that have those so-called vestigial spurs, and but they're very important for those snakes as copulatory organs. My question is, why don't all snakes have them? I mean, why just two different types mainly have them? And so therefore they have a function, and the function is pretty important. The same with whales. Whales have what they used to think were feet. They used to walk around, or legs actually, and legs with feet. But now we know they're copulatory organs as well. And so therefore they serve critically important functions. But any person who's an expert on snakes or whales will realize this. Again, it's often those who are ignorant about these organs that make these claims. But of course, losing a snake losing legs is de-evolution. They're losing something. So they have to claim not only how they evolved legs and feet, but also in this case, why would they lose them? And so that's the claim that's made, that they're lost, except in a couple of animals. And I forget which ones, but copulatory means it helps them have sexual relations to reproduce.
That's what I'm thinking, because I heard I was going to ask you about whether that has to do with their sexual reproduction
Yeah.
in with other snakes. Why does only two of them have it, do you think? Two
I don't
types.
know. Bigger question is, why don't all of them have it? But evidently they are able to curl up with their mate and be able to mate effectively. For some reason, these two snakes can't do that, or this facilitates their being able to copulate appropriately to reproduce. And again, can't reproduce, that's the end of the line. So
Right.
got to be able to reproduce.
When you were talking about the whales, was you talking about the hip bones of the whales? Because that was my next one.
Well,
So
there's structures that extend from the back of again, they're copulatory organs, and they extend out away from the whale's body.
all right.
And again, they're small, but the theory is that whales evolved from terrestrial animals,
Yeah.
and therefore they lost their legs when they evolved to go back in the water.
I thought the evolution claimed that all life came from the sea to land.
Yeah,
So
yeah, they came from the sea. They evolved to live in the terrestrial environment, and then they evolved more and went back to the sea.
oh, wow. Okay. All right. What the teeth in a whale fetus? What exactly is that?
Teeth in the whale's fetus.
Yeah.
Oh, they're structures which help the whale during a certain period of development. I don't know if you call them teeth, but I guess they're structures there that I think they're bone, but on the other hand, yeah, they're structures that help the whale when it's developing.
Right. I think your book used the words teeth, but I think it's using the objection that people come up with.
Yeah,
Maybe, but it's not really teeth, is what you're saying, right? Um,
kind of call them something, and teeth is an appropriate term because they're like teeth. So
Horse split bones. What is that, and why do they think it's vestigial?
the which bones?
Uh, horse split bones. S P L
Oh,
I
the
N T.
horse.
Yeah, horse.
Horse. Oh, that's a whole interesting story. One of the main things about horses is that you have a huge amount of variety. And they used to have these charts which showed a small animal like about the size of a dog, small dog, and they evolved into the horse. And that evolutionary progression has been thoroughly debunked. And part of that progression is they postulated certain structures. And like instead of having 3 feet, I think the original, they suppose they had 3 feet and now they have 1 feet. They lost 2 feet, they lost or 2 feet. But the splint bones help the horse as it's running, they deal with vibrations. The vibrations can be pretty bad, and the split bones help strengthen and reduce the vibrational problems in a horse running. And if you've seen a horse, especially a horse who's carrying a man, a 200-pound man, you got the horse's body, which is huge, and these relatively small legs, you wonder how in the world they can do what they do, given the weight they have to carry around, not only carry around the weight, but they're running. And therefore, there's a lot of force. I think 800 pounds, one study found force on the feet, and you wonder how in the world that they can deal with that strength. Well, one reason they can is because of these splint bones.
Awesome. All right. You spent a good deal of time talking in your book, at least a couple pages or so. Blind cave animals. Animals, I guess, that are virtually blind or something like that in cave environments.
Yeah, the more commonly used example is fish that are blind, and they found that the fish that are blind, they adapt to environment, and the eyes they can be damaged and cause a problem. And so losing the eyes in a way is adapting to a very dark water environment where sight doesn't do much good anyways. And but of course, again, that's the evolution. They don't use the eyes, and they they deteriorate. The thing that's built-in mechanism so that they can protect themselves in dark environments where the eyes don't do much good. And so development of the eyes requires the use of vision in a visual environment. And so
Um,
this is an adaptation response, which is quite functional.
you didn't mention this in your book, but you didn't give this example. But would bats be considered an example of a blind cave? And technically speaking, bats are actually not blind. A lot of times people say blind is a bat. In reality, they just have poor eyesight. So they have what they call echolocation, where they can scream out, and they got really good hearing where they can hear that. Um, in fact, bats probably see better than we do
With yeah,
because
echolocation,
they
yeah.
have echolocation where they can just. But would that be an example of a blind cave animal or whatnot, where they just don't see very well in dark?
Yeah, I don't know if bats totally lose their visual ability, but I know it's not very good, but it doesn't need to be because if you looked at the studies that they've done, there's a lot of movies, they'll have an area and they'll have wires in the area, and they can avoid those wires where it's hard for us to see the wires, and therefore they are that effective that they can pick up the wire and avoid it. They can move around those wires without bumping into them. And so they found really it's incredibly accurate way of determining what's in front of you, far more accurate than wires are. I know sometimes we have things that are not really wires necessarily, but things that are in front of us, and we don't see it. We bounce into it. Well, the best example is, I guess, glass. Some people don't see as well as others, and therefore they bump into glass. And therefore, there's a requirement in many stores to have some type of blockage on the glass, a tape or something to basically let visitors know that there's glass here. And the bats have no problem. They pick up the glass and just ignore it. They realize the glass there. Of course, glass is going to reflect the sound, and you put a glass, well, a small piece of glass, a drinking glass, in the cage, and they effectively avoid it. And so, therefore, in for bats, they're more sensitive than we are. I fortunately have rarely done this, but in my life, probably twice I ran into windows, and boy, I'll tell you, it can hurt. And you're not aware that they're there, and you keep walking, not a second thought, and you bang right into the window. And I can't
Birds
remember
are
where it's
birds are known for
happened, but
crashing in windows.
what?
Birds are known for crashing in windows,
Yeah,
but
the
they think
bird's
it's
another
open
example,
space and then they hit the window.
which
Um,
can be pretty tragic. Yeah.
I have a question on those lines, because it's one of my questions in my question. But and it's something you deal with in your book as well. There were some critics that try to argue for poor design, like for example, the bat's eyesight or something like that. That this is a badly designed example, and this works against our view that this was all intelligently designed. How would you respond to someone who thinks that this is an examples of poor design?
Well, I have a book called Poor Design, and I cover the claims of poor design in humans, and I don't get into animals. But it's ironic that the poor design claims are almost always with humans and not with animals. But I would say with animals, when we look into detail about the design, we find that it's not poorly designed. And the most commonly made with humans, and in fact, I think that's a 300 and some odd page book that I cover in detail the claims of poor design, which are really in many ways ludicrous, the claims. And so I've dealt with this quite extensively in that one book. And with now you're looking at which animal they claim is poorly designed, the
Well, I
bats.
was asking about the bat eyesight on that, but in general, just wondering because you did talk about this in your book on claims of bad design of the way evolutionists claim that that there are examples of poor design, and I guess it's a way of trying to refute the idea that everything's intelligently designed by,
Yeah,
God and
it is. And I would say with bats, they probably, the eyesight they have, they're probably very, very useful. But I'm not sure we know exactly what it's useful for. Bats don't cooperate very well when you do research, and you can put them in a large area and you can put strings or wires or uh, glass lines in front of them, and they very effectively avoid these such things. So we
well,
know their echolocation is incredibly well designed. And so they may claim, well, their eyesight is not as good. But on the other hand, I would say the best explanation is that they would end up with overload, sensory overload. And that can be, well, with people, it can be very serious. Talk to any mother with a screaming kid and phone rings and so on. Someone will just scream and say, leave me alone, leave me alone. It's just, they're overstimulated and that can be a problem. And so I would say with many animals, you don't want them to have excellent design in some areas because you don't want to overstimulate them and cause a problem. And so
the,
design is specific for the environment that the animal lives in.
the ears of a bat, for example, are extremely good at hearing. So yeah, like you said, it would be over design. Another thing is that uh, bats usually hunt at night when it's really dark. So echolocation actually works better than traditional eyesight.
Yeah,
Would be able to hunt for the prey and be able to see. But like I said, they could see better than we can because they have echolocation. Like you got dolphins. Dolphins have echolocation underwater, but you don't really need very good eyesight underwater because your vision is going to be distorted anyhow. But
right.
I think dolphins do actually have good vision in the water, isn't it?
To some degree, yeah. Again, it's they don't we can't show them an eye chart and they say, well, I can see this really well. Because obviously, you can't do the evaluations you do for people. And from my knowledge, they have pretty good vision for their environment.
All right.
And
They have
echolocation is a way of supplementing their vision.
kind of
And
like
so they have the
sonar in
best
it.
of both.
Kind of like sonar underwater in it.
Yeah, well, that's what it is.
That is, in fact, I think if I'm not mistaken, sonar was actually based off of echolocation.
Right. It was. It inspired us.
Yeah, that shows that we can actually that shows that these things are not being poorly designed. We're actually borrowing what God has already done and create our technology with it.
Right.
All right. Okay, There's some, you mentioned in your book about vestigial behaviors that some people think. This is kind of odd to me because that doesn't seem like something that would be hereditary. It seems to be more habitual, like swinging your arms, and they'll claim that, like, see there, that's when we used to swing in trees. Uh, what would your response be to people who might think? I know this is probably not a common one that gets brought up, but in case someone brings up what they think are vestigial behaviors like this.
But that is a supposition that we should be able to climb trees or we should be able to do the things that primates can do who have longer arms. And so that's a conclusion when we are compared with other creatures. And so to say they're vestigial behavior, I guess you could make that claim, but if you're creative. But on the other hand, again, I would be concerned about the problem of over design and overstimulation. And our arms are designed to do what they do quite well. I don't know many people who complain about what they can or cannot do with their arms.
Would
And so
you
when they're
say
older
that?
and they don't function as well, they might, but
Would you say that maybe the swinging of the arms could also help with balance? Kind of like
it
the way when
does.
we put our arms side by side, we kind of try to balance ourselves out, and so
It,
maybe the swinging of the arms could
it
aid
clearly
in
does help
balance.
with balance. Yeah. And in
Uh,
case you're about to fall, you can catch yourself. Your arms are basically ready in case you slip on something and you can and
My
catch
my
yourself.
I've had a couple incidents where my equilibrium in my ear messed up, I guess because of drainage or something, and I would literally fall right forward. I'll just stop in my track and just fall right forward. And my arms is what I use to catch myself on the ground.
Yeah.
So it's like an automatic reflex. When something's coming at you, you will automatically grab for it and try to uh, prevent any damage. Do you, I don't know if you're familiar with what school textbooks presently claim on vestigial organs. Do they still try to promote this idea very much?
From my experience talking to my grandkids, yes, they still try to promote this. Maybe not as extensively as they used to. Used to have pages on it. And the ones I've looked at recently, there's maybe a page or two. So it's less extensive than it used to be. But on the other hand, I'm surprised it's mentioned at all. And again, this is in biology books. It's not in anatomy and physiology books or other related books. So it's in a certain area.
Uh, you dealt with this in your book as well, but some people think that vestigial organs pose a problem for YC view. Exactly. Do you
For
want
what?
vestigial organs posing a problem from the idea of intelligent design? Do you want to kind of respond to that exactly? What is the issue involved there?
Well, when we show they have a function and an important function in some cases, then that, of course, minimizes the intelligent design or lack of intelligent design, in this case, concern. So, from my understanding of vestigial organs, I've taught anatomy for many years. It's clear that they are well designed and they're not vestigial, and therefore they illustrate well design.
Do embryos have a tail? Some people claim that they have a tail on the end of it.
Okay, what's going on there is what part of the body develops first. Well, one of the most important parts of the body that has to develop is the nervous system. It has to have a nervous system for the rest of it to function. And so the nervous system is primarily taken care of by the brain and the spinal cord. And the spinal cord develops earlier than other structures. And so it appears to be a tail, but it's not a tail. It's a more developed spinal cord, which of course has to develop to coordinate the rest of the body development activities. And therefore, it's not a tail. It doesn't function as a tail. It functions as a spinal cord does because the development has to be for the brain. The brain, same thing. They have big brains, comparatively large brains, and comparatively large spinal cords. And that's because the nervous system is critical that it develops first. Muscles, etc., can develop later. That's not so less of a concern. So the key is the coordination done by the nervous system, and therefore that has to develop first.
We've talked about vestigial organs in humans. We talked about vestigial organs in animals. This one's a new one on me. Vestigial organs in plants. They think that there are vestigial organs in plants. Do you want to talk on that for a second?
Well, I'm not a botanist, so I can't really say too much about that, but my guess is we would find they have functions as well. In plants, a lot of the function are just beauty. My wife is into plants. We have, I think I counted them once, we had something like 50 plants in the house. And there's a lot of variety. And my guess is a lot of this variety has no direct functional purpose except for beauty.
The aesthetics.
Plants have differences because I think of beauty. And when I look at them, I say, what does this do? Why is this here? It certainly adds the attractiveness of the plants. And why she bought the plants is because of this attractive feature in the plants. And so therefore, I would say any claims of vestigiality in plants probably are design related to beauty and attractiveness for humans, as well as insects and birds and so on. So they have to attract, to pollinate, they have to attract certain insects like bees. And so therefore these structures serve a very important function.
Right. Evolutionists think that we're all related to plants. So they would try to claim that as part of our evolutionary development and stuff like that all throughout all life, because they think all life is related and go back to a common ancestor. And so
Right.
that's why they would probably try to push the idea of a vestigial structure in plants. But like you said, of course, plants. One of the purposes of plants is, like you said, aesthetics. It's designed to make things look better,
Right.
and to attract it. And of course, to you want to attract certain insects so that it could aid in pollination and things like that.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. Well, I think we hit the end of our discussion. We had a few technical difficulties, but we managed to get through this. Do you have any final words, final thoughts that you want to convey to everybody with
Uh,
this
yeah,
subject?
one of the best examples is if you look at the evolutionary tree, at the bottom of it is worms. So worms would be the common ancestor of all people. The interesting thing is today, what do we have? We have worms are the common ancestor of humans. So some worms developed into humans. We have worms which are still around today. And so some worms simply still stayed worms. So there it is. And then we have some worms. I just did a paper on this on my website, crev.info, crev.info. And I have a paper where worms developed, ironically, our type of camera eyes. So some worms developed in people, other worms didn't develop, didn't change at all. They're still worms. Other worms developed camera type eyes. And this has really baffled scientists because why would these worms have camera type eyes? And they compared it to human eyes and they said, you know, in many ways they're very similar. It's a marine animal, so it's going to be different design, but it's interesting to look at these animals with big eyes on the top of the front, the worms, so with big eyes on the front of their forehead. So we have many examples. If you think of these comparisons, some worms became people, some worms still stayed worms, some worms developed human camera type eyes. It really helps illustrate how ludicrous evolutionary beliefs in many ways are. Why didn't why didn't all the worms evolve? Why do we still have worms today? How did some worms develop into people? Why did some worms develop into uh, with people like, except the worms the same, but the camera eyes are very much like human eyes, which is a fascinating subject, and I cover that in my crev.info. So I have about 200 articles on there now, I think. So, or more than that. So, the questions on these things, I do four a month. So, I spend a lot of time. I used to spend a lot of time reading. Now I have to spend a huge amount of time writing because I'm responsible for about two articles every week. And so, but it's a fascinating area to get into. And the more I research in this area, the more I'm concluding that evolution really, it's ludicrous. Why in the world do people believe in such a foolish idea, which has been so clearly proven wrong? Well, they do because that's the environment. That's what they learn in school. When I went to college, studied biology, etc., that's all I learned. Studied genetics, still have my genetics book. That's all I learned was evolution. So they're exposed to it everywhere, and they believe it because they're exposed to it. But in fact, the more you get into it, and most of my information is from evolution books. I have shelf after shelf of books on evolution, and I learn about the problems of evolution by reading books on evolution. And it's there, you just have to dig into it. And most evolutionists believe in evolution, and they point out, yeah, there's a problem. I just did an article on the tongue. They point out, yeah, we got a big problem with the tongue. We can't figure out how it evolved, but we know it must have evolved for us to survive in a terrestrial environment. And so, therefore, I have no idea how it did evolve, but we know it did evolve. While they admit that we don't have a clue as to how the tongue could have evolved. But the fact is that fish can open their mouth and swim forward and they get their food. Whereas terrestrial animals, virtually all, you cannot swallow very effectively on a terrestrial environment without a tongue. The tongue has to be functional. And the tongue is really very complex. It has muscles, nerves, etc. So it's a very complex structure. And they can't even pretend they can come up with an idea at how the tongue could evolve because you can't eat on land unless you have a tongue, period. They use mud skippers to try to postulate that, but that doesn't work at all. I cover that in my article on the tongue, which is not out yet, but hopefully will be soon.
I know that tongue also aids, at least for people, it aids us in being a speech as well. We use the tongue as try to speak without using your tongue movement. It's hard to do it. You wouldn't be able to do it properly. You wouldn't sound right.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's why they
Infections.
watch your tongue. They're talking about watch your speech.
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah,
So it has many other functions, but many animals don't talk, so therefore
right.
they that's not an
But
argument. But what I looked at was the problem of you have to have a tongue before you can survive on land. So how did you go from fish to land animals without a tongue? Of course, the evolutionists said, well, you evolved it. Well, but how? How can you come up with a story, a a just so story? That's what Gould calls it. Stephen Jay Gould, a just so story. Can you come up with a just so story that would explain theoretically how you could evolve a tongue? They can't. They admit that. In the articles I have, they admit that we can't even come up with a possible scenario. May not be true, but we can't even make up something.
and of course, if natural selection is based on survivability and you can't survive that way, how can you be able to survive long enough to inherit those genes to the next generation?
Yeah. Well, they explain it. Well, here we are. We're surviving now, so must have evolved. We can't figure out how it occurred, but it must have occurred. We don't know how it occurred, but it must have occurred because here you and I are, and we know we evolved from worms, and worms evolved from other simple organisms. So therefore, we know that somehow it happened. We just have to figure out how.
Yeah,
But
that's circular. But
somehow,
thank you for joining us on here and talk to us about vestigial organs. Where's your article supposed to appear on that on vestigial?
okay, on crev.info is where I have quite a few articles. And often I publish things on there first, and then the articles there become part of books that I write later on.
Right.
That's how often I do it. But the revisions on the vestigial organ and the other useless organs book. I had a medical doctor who, by the way, he makes his living by evaluating and correcting textbooks, biochemistry, anatomy textbooks. So he's really good. I mean, they hire him to go through these major textbooks that now are found throughout the world. And so you're not going to find anybody better than this person. Well, they know that. That's why they hire him to review the textbooks before they're published. So he's a medical MD, and so he a lot of minor stuff he found, but on the other hand, he clarified a few things, and so I'm very grateful for his professional going through it. And now my book is hopefully with almost no errors. There's always you get errors in books. To be error free is said only one book in the world ever been published that's error free, and that's the Bible.
Thank you. I
Sure.
appreciate
Thanks a
it.
lot.
All right. God bless.
Okay. God bless. Bye.
Well, thank you for watching Apologetics 101. I do appreciate it. This has been awesome discussion. Thank you for joining me on here. Um, if you like the way my mic sounds, let me know. This is a brand new mic. I've been playing with it since I got it hooked up to my computer, and and it's been fun. It sounds a little bit more higher quality in terms of mic. It's got that professional studio feel to it. I'm hoping to eventually get a few more episodes of the Topics Controversy out. Like I said, my next episode's probably going to be in roughly about a month because I got to do some experiments. I got another series of experiments I'm about to do. Um, but I'm hoping to get a couple videos out on with Donnie Badinsky from Standing for Truth Ministries. One of which is going to be on ERVs, which is going to be for the Genesis series. The other one's just going to be an individual video, not connected to any series, but as a response to some of the critics' comments and objections to a particular analogy that's often used by Dr. Nathaniel Jensen as well as by Donnie in many of his discussions with evolutionists. And so we're going to be talking about that and responding to this particular objection in that particular video as well. So me and Donnie just have to air out a few details, and hopefully we'll get a set time so that we can be able to do that. But I can't wait. And I can't wait to show the experiments I've been doing. I've developed a method uh, to determine the unalignable regions of the genome. So, in the next episode of the Tompkins Controversy is going to be called The Unalignable Regions of the Genome, and I can't wait to have that discussion. Originally, I was going to talk about it a little bit. It's going to be a big part of a conversation that I was going to have on weighted versus unweighted. Besides just to make an entire video of that, so I now took blast down to the command line, and I was able to develop a method to look at some of these differences that are not being aligned by the program, and be able to discuss those as we move forward. As we're approaching closely to the end of this discussion and at the end of this controversy, I want to make sure that we have a full understanding of the primary issue at heart here, and that's that there's information that is being ignored by the algorithms that and tools that are being used, and a lot and evolutionists know about it, but they're ignoring that as well. And this means that humans and chimps are actually less similar than is being claimed by the evolutionary community, or at least most evolutionists would claim today. And of course, Richard Buggs. We're going to talk a little bit more about Richard Buggs in that video as well. I know we talked about it in the first episode, but since a lot of people didn't enter into the series till about midway, it would be a good idea to go ahead and bring up Richard Buggs and discuss how he looked at some of these unalignable regions and began to recalculate them back in and came up with a lesser number than what the most evolutionists were saying. And Dr. Richard Buggs is actually an evolutionist himself. So they was coming up to these numbers and much lower than what's being claimed. So this is it's going to be an awesome discussion, but I've got more work to be done before that video comes out. So stay tuned for it. I'm glad you were here for Vestigial Organ. Let me tell you my position on this, and it's the same as Dr. Bergman. Essentially, the fact that you don't know what a function is does not mean that it's vestigial. It just simply means we don't know. Uh, it's possible that more research and study needs to be done to find a function, but the fact that we don't know it doesn't mean it doesn't have one. Also, the vast majority of them nowadays has been well acknowledged to have functions to them, and so I don't think that you could really argue the whole idea of vestigial without sounding outdated, like sounding like someone who is not up on the times. In fact, uh, people who do acknowledge the fact that these things have functions are forced in a situation where they have to redefine what the word vestigial means, maybe even using the word rudiment, and try to say, oh, well, we don't really necessarily have to claim that it doesn't have any function. Uh, but that's just redefining it. It's post hoc. It winds up being circular. It makes the whole definition of vestigial or rudiment or whatever case you want to make subjective, because now you can make any part of your body vestigial subjective if you're defining it the way that article defined it, that that it would be dependent on um, the what it was original function was, and so you could argue any part of the body you want to as vestigial, if that's how you what direction you want to go to with on that. So I think Dr. Bergman did a really good job of analyzing the issues and arguments on this. Um, and I know last time I had Dr. Jerry Bergman on, or not the last time, but one of the times I had Dr. Jerry Bergman on, people were attacking Dr. Bergman and calling him a liar and questioning his degrees and things like that. And listen, okay, Dr. Jerry Bergman is a qualified expert. Uh, the claim that he was kicked out of a university is false. I proved that later, early on. Someone got that from Rational Wiki, which is a very hostile anti-creationist source, and it's not even very respectable. It doesn't, it's not a credible source. I think it's the word I'm looking for, and that sort of thing. So, and all the sources I find show they hit the universities that he got his degree from were accredited universities that were very credible and so forth. So, let's stop with the ad hominems. Let's stop with the disrespect. Uh, just because you don't agree with him doesn't mean he's lying. Okay, stop with the ad hominems. Okay, just deal with the arguments. Just if you can't deal with the arguments, it's better off just not saying anything and or come on there and just be honest and say, yeah, I guess the whole vestigial argument is just bogus. It doesn't work. That's right, it doesn't, and we need to move ahead on this, because if it doesn't work and you've tried and tried and tried to make it work, and it clearly doesn't, and a lot of it, I mean, probably all of it is just based totally on ignorance, as Dr. Bergman mentioned. It's just an argument from ignorance. It's just like, we don't know what it is, so therefore it must not, have a function. It must be useless. It must be pointless. It must be a leftover remnant. And that's just not scientific to argue something like that. So we got to be careful to argue that kind of thing. All right. Thank you for joining me on here. I was so glad to have it. I'm glad I was able to try this mic situation out. I love it. I enjoy it. If you enjoy this kind of professional sounding quality in my vocals, let me know. If the audio's off, maybe it needs to be adjust it somewhere, and just let me know, and I'll see if I can try to fix the audio better next time around. But it sounded perfect pretty much, from what I gather whenever I hear the playback of it. All right, see you next time on Apologetics 101, and until then, stay in the know. You know the drill.